Welcome back, everyone. Happy Satoshi Sunday. This is episode number 6, I think, which is crazy because that means we've been doing this segment for 6 weeks. Now, you guys know my dad, Global Hodl. He is back as usual. Dad, do you want to say hi?
Hey, everybody.
All right. This time we have another very special guest. Joining us today is my little brother, who is a high school junior. How you doing, kiddo?
I'm doing good. I'm pretty excited to be on this podcast. I've been seeing your channel grow over the past few months, and I've just been waiting for the call up,
Yeah, that's true. It is about time that you're on the podcast. Well, today, everyone listening, we are going to be doing a generational deep dive on the future of work, the real value of college, and how someone who is as young as 17 years old can actually go about building wealth in a system that feels fundamentally broken. To start us off, let's get right into it. So, Vivon, tell me first things first. What do you know about Bitcoin?
So I would say my knowledge in Bitcoin is pretty similar to how yours was a couple months ago. I was a little bit behind because obviously we're learning from the same person, Global Hodl, our father. So I've kind of been taught to think about Bitcoin more as a sort of money instead of an asset, as is like globally seen as, right? In the mainstream, Bitcoin is seen as another like investment, like another stock or a house or something, when in reality, the benefits and properties that Bitcoin holds are more similar to something that like gold or silver or the like hard monies, right?
Okay, yeah. I'm going to follow this up by asking you, what is money? Because you mentioned Bitcoin is a form of money, but to you, what does money actually mean?
To me, money is a way to store value, kind of like, we don't live in a barter system anymore where I can give you a loaf of bread for a pair of shoes. We need some sort of medium. And that is what that's what money is. Money is that medium.
Dad, do you have any response to that question?
I think I'll add a little more clarification. You said right, Vivan, that money is a store of value. Like what you don't want to happen is you have a little bit of money today, but what you actually want to buy, you don't want to buy it today. You want to buy it like 5 years down the road. Like, for example, you are 17, you say, hey, when I come out of college in a few years, or when I've set up myself and then I want to buy something. I want to buy a car, I want to buy a house, I want to buy, something. You don't want your money to lose its purchasing power, right? Something that you can hold and buy today, you should be able to buy the same thing with the same amount of money in future, right? That's money. The medium of exchange aspect is what currency is. So US dollar is a currency. It's not
Yes.
money, right? You want to buy Apple, you give somebody 50 cents, they give you an apple, you walk away, right? But that 50 cents is not 50 cents tomorrow, right? 1 month down the road, the 50 cents won't be able to buy the same apple. So that's in my mind a subtle difference.
Yeah. That's actually a good differentiation to make. That hadn't really crossed my mind before.
So, Dad, you mentioned this idea of 50 cents, not being able to buy the same apple 1 month down the line. Now, what I want to ask Vivon do you understand what that means? Do you understand why that 50 cents might not be able to buy that same apple?
I mean, it kind of comes down to the fact that our money or our currency is losing its value because there's more of it, right? When the demand doesn't change, but the supply does, it's like economics 101, right? The value is inherently going to decrease
So, what's actually happening to the money? I mean, why is the value of it decreasing?
because we're just printing more and more of it. Like there's no,
Okay, so
like
you
there's no tomorrow.
understand that money is being printed.
Yes.
You understand what inflation is.
Yes.
All right, that's a good thing. So, as you guys know, both my brother and I were orange pilled by our parents. Starting off with, my dad went in, made us watch What's the Problem? Yvonne, do you remember watching What's the Problem?
I do. It was the Fiatellos, right?
Yeah, the
The groups of
Satoshis and
monkeys
the
on the island.
Fiatellos.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what did you think? What did you think of that video?
I actually really enjoyed it because it kind of like the differences between the two groups of like currencies, right? And with the Satoshis, and like it kind of demonstrated how in economics, as long as you don't keep on messing with the system will eventually come back and neutralize, right? Whenever there was some sort of economic crisis or some sort of problem, that the the world or the system, their currency would naturally restabilize. Whereas with the fiatellos, it was the government was consistently trying the government or the monkey leadership were consistently trying to restabilize themselves. They were trying to artificially change the process or the way that the currency's like story was playing out.
Exactly. Wow. Okay. I'm actually really impressed because I didn't think you would, you got that as a takeaway from the video. But let's get into the meat of the episode here now that we've kind of seen where you stand with Bitcoin and where you stand of money. With money. You are a junior in high school, which means you are at a very formative time in your life. You're probably starting to think about, career paths and probably what you want to do after high school and kind of seeing what's important in the world and what isn't. So, when you think about your future career, where do you kind of stand? Do you have any fears? Do you have any excitement? Like what's the headspace that you're in?
For me, growing up, I had always thought of myself as a person who was going to go into, a 4-year university, maybe do some sort of graduate school after. And most recently, I was thinking about pursuing something in finance because I found that really interesting. When I first started investing and learning about basic economics and whatnot, I found that really intriguing to me, like something I wanted to pursue because I felt like I could just think about the stuff all day and not get bored of it, right? But then now with this whole orange pilling, our family, and I think more specifically me, I I don't since I don't believe in the current money, I don't believe in like the fiat money being the end all be all. That inherently makes me like resilient into pursuing a career that's like keeping the system like up afloat, right? So that's why I've recently been kind of trying to think of other things that maybe won't be harmed by the change of money or by the change of AI, the other giant thing in our world today. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of, just trying to think of different fields and different aspects of like university that I could go into and study and make a career out of that wouldn't be completely disrupted by one of these two aspects.
Dad, do you have any thoughts kind of watching, your son grow up and what you're thinking as, maybe potential career paths as he graduates high school?
Oh, sure. I have plenty of thoughts, but I also have, these two conflicting thoughts in my head right now, right? So one is I believe there is still some value in pursuing a 4-year degree. And I think the most important thing I believe that the school teaches you is not the curriculum, right? So you can buy the same books on Amazon or Audible and just listen to those books or read those books. Maybe, if you don't understand something, go to YouTube, go to AI. You'll be able to get everything you study in college on your own. What college teaches you is discipline, like showing up to the same place every day for 4 years in a row,
But do you
right?
think that's specific to college? Because I think you show up to the same place when you're in school, when you go to work.
Yep, 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 yep. So going to work comes a little later. So school, like especially, and maybe I'm wrong. You guys can correct me if I'm thinking wrong. I think in the early school time, kids usually see school as I'm gonna go meet my friends and play with them,
Yeah, maybe
right?
when you're young, but when you're in high school, it's a bit different, isn't it?
Correct, but I think the most important thing with college is when you go with the mindset I'm going to build a career. And in school there is this enforcement of attendance. If you miss the school, they'll call the parents. Nobody's calling the parents if you miss the college. Like parents don't even know if you are in college, if you're sitting in a class, or you are sleeping in your dorm, or you're going on a vacation with a friend, and we don't know, right? So in my mind, the most important aspect of you getting up yourself and showing up to the same place for 4 years in a row, no matter if it rains or shines or whatever happens, that's a very important trait to become successful in life, right? Like one thing one of my early mentors told me is like, bet against anybody, never bet against a person who will show up every day relentlessly. Because somebody who shows up every day will eventually succeed, right? That's the willpower. That's the, the go-getter kind of, spirit that I would not bet against. So I think that
Okay.
that in my mind is a valuable skill that you get from college, especially because you have to self-impose that discipline on you. Now there is another aspect of people go to college and it becomes a 4-year party ground for and then that's all that happens.
Well, this is interesting because I don't know if you know, but Elon Musk recently came out and said, right, if you want to go to college, only go for the experience. There's no point going for the curriculum.
Exactly, I agree with it. Don't go for curriculum. Go for the experience. Experience includes, you get time to spend with your friends, live life as young adults, enjoy that freedom that comes along with it, but also start building the discipline that probably if you were to stay home and not go to college, you probably won't get.
Okay, so from the aspect of career building, then college to
Yeah,
you is
like
building
I
discipline.
don't think going to college for curriculum that was never true in the real world. But
Okay.
in today's world, with access to information being almost free,
Hmm.
that becomes more irrelevant today. Like when I went to college, internet was just starting up, right? Dial-up connections. You guys don't even know what those things are. Like on that, a simple website, a text-based website would take a couple of seconds to load up, right? There used to be a thing called as download manager, because to download a 2 or a 3 megabytes file, it will take 6, 7, 10 minutes, and then your connection might drop, and then it will reset, and you have to restart again. So download manager will basically give you the ability to resume from that point. You guys don't even worry, but now you download like few gigabytes in like matter of couple of minutes,
Yeah, that's true.
right? So
That is true.
I think so. From that perspective, from the curriculum standpoint, it doesn't make any more sense.
Hmm. What's the
But
other thought?
the other thought is it worthwhile to spend the kind of money that you pay to college, right? Unless you come from a very wealthy family where money is not a problem, right? I think that's what Elon Musk was talking about. If your parents can afford it, they can write you a check of 400K, 500K. You want to go for 4 years, party around, come back and join the family business. It's a different story, right? So the other competing thought is maybe there is value in taking that money and dividing it into a couple of different buckets. You can use one bucket and say, okay, this is my savings bucket. I'm going to buy Bitcoin, store it for 30 years, not going to look at it. This is my next bucket, which is my emergency fund. I'm going to, fall back on it if nothing else works. And I'm going to take this third bucket. I'm going to go build something. Right? Remember, we talked in our last episode. I strongly believe the world will belong to builders. Right? And again, I want to specify one thing very clear. Don't build something for fun. Build something to add value. Solve a problem.
Yeah, and this is
Because
something that we spoke about in the British interview that went live on Friday of this week. Value is currency, right? You are what you create for the world. So in a world where this is kind of the ethos, this is the foundation, I would say that it is possible to build discipline through, whatever endeavor you try to go towards, right? Building is not easy. That requires discipline, and I think that would
yes,
instill that in you regardless. So doesn't that kind of outweigh the other thought that you have?
it does. in a way, but I'm still, in this thing. Maybe there are few things. Like, for example, if somebody wants to become a doctor, you can't become
Mhm.
a doctor by
That
studying,
is true. That I agree
right?
with.
Yourself,
Yeah.
you have to go to school, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lawyer, I don't think anybody should become a lawyer. Lawyer is, legal or law is a very, very sad profession, right?
That's
No,
fair.
no, no, nobody goes to a lawyer and says, "Hey, I'm happy, I got a promotion, so I need some advice from you." People
Mhm.
usually go when they are ending up in a divorce, need to file a lawsuit on the company because they got
Yeah,
fired or something or the other, right? When things are not
that is
right,
fair. That
right?
is fair.
So
I
I
mean,
don't
I
think
do
any,
think that the
yeah,
world needs lawyers, and in a way you are helping people and stuff, but I do think that,
sure,
like, if that's not what you're
sure.
passionate about, then
Yes, I agree. I'm not saying we don't need lawyers. I personally don't like the law profession. Is all I'm trying to
yeah.
say,
Yeah,
right?
No matter how cool suits makes it look, it's not that fun.
yeah. That's also
And
corporate law, right? So that's different.
yes, yes, corporate law and especially in the United States, it's more of a land of litigation. How do we extract more value from other businesses? Yeah, so that's what it is. But anyway, so the point being, there are if depending on so first of all, start with what do you want to do? How do you want to add value to the world, right? Once you figure that out, then you have to basically say, do I really need to go to school for 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 12 years, whatever it may be?
Yeah.
Or can I get skills by doing some internships, by reading some books, by, going to a trade school, by, being an apprentice to somebody else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting that, you're talking about this because when I was at Vivon's position 4 years ago, you and I were in a very different boat with our conversation, right? The conversation never relied around what is it that you want to do? What can you build? It was what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then what are the fields that are prospering at the time? And it was computer science. So just to kind of get into that a little bit more, because we released an episode. This was one of the very first Satoshi Sundays, maybe number one or number two. And I had some comments that were talking about how some of the listeners had, you know, kids who were in high school and they were in the same boat. So, how are you approaching these conversations with Vivon? What are some of the things you're asking him? And then, Vivon, this is where you chime in as well with some of your answers, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I'll probably, I'll give you my point of view, or especially I want to add some clarification on why the conversations went the way they went 4 years ago. And then I'll let Vivan chime in, and then I can add more color to it, right? So the difference between when we were having conversation about you, Nikki, was AI was not a thing. Chat GPT wasn't even announced, right? Sure, I in my profession was using AI, but AI wasn't available to common person, common man, common woman, right? A normal human being, an average Joe. And but with the introduction of Chat GPT and all the models that came after, now everybody has a super intelligent or a couple of super intelligent, AIs that they can ask about anything. And in the most recent past, what AI has done is it has driven the entry to barriers to a lot of businesses to almost zero. Like today, if somebody wants to spend a couple $100 and they have a tiny machine that they can leave it on connected to the internet all day long, right? They can set up an army of agents to do whatever the hell they want to do. Right? You saw, I was playing around with OpenClaw
Yeah.
yesterday,
Yeah, Patrick.
right? So I was basically able to hook it up to my Claude subscription and set it up. And I was able to, connect it to my Telegram where I can ask it anything. I was able to give it a persona. I called it Patrick, right? From For the Love of SpongeBob. Thank you to both of you. And the next one probably is going to be, SpongeBob, and then, crabs, and, and the list goes on, right? But now I can go to each of these agents and say, hey, Patrick, your job is primarily research and analysis.
Mhm.
And I can go to another one and say, Mr. Krabs, your job is to write code for me, right? And I can say, SpongeBob, your job is to write the marketing content for me, right? Once I do that and hook them up to my Claude Max subscriptions or OpenAI keys or whatnot, I can build anything on the go, sitting in the car through my phone, right? That wasn't possible 4 years ago,
100%.
right? And you will have to have, like, if you didn't have the skills 4 years ago, you will probably have to hire somebody, and that would not be like $200-$400 a month. That will be like $20,000 a month to hire these 4 or 5 people, right? Was a big difference, right? So now I'll let Vivan kind of share what he's thinking, then I'll add color on how I'm thinking about his future.
Yeah, Ivan, do you have any
Um,
thoughts?
I want to point out something about the whole concept of AI agents and how like they're supposed to be tuned to solve a specific task, right? Like Patrick was like for research analysis of whatever what you're saying, right? Like I really noticed because, obviously I use AI quite often. I try not to use it like with my actual schoolwork just because the board has so many different like restrictions and policies. But say if I'm like studying for an exam or something, right? I think like the response is only as strong as your question is, right? Like you have to be like, oh, I want to specifically work on this part. Like if I'm trying to work out with like math, like probability, like, oh, I need specifically help with Bayes theory or something, Bayes theorem. Like I think that's, I think it's really just something that like I specifically noticed that it's just like in order to get a desirable output, you need to tune it. And that's why like this whole concept of AI agents specifically that, obviously Dad has been talking, but also I don't remember which podcast it was. One of the ones you made me listen to a few months ago that was completely talking about AI agents. I think it was the Tom Bilyeu and the
Yeah.
yeah. I forgot who the interviewee was, but that one really like opened my eyes on the concept of agents and how they're going to be like everybody has their own to do their own things. And it's like really interesting. It also kind of ties back into the most recent Satoshi Sundays on the concept of builders and how they're going to be the ones that are actually like successful in this new world, just because they're the ones that are utilizing these AI agents to the max.
Yeah, yeah. So have you thought about becoming a builder yourself? What does being a builder mean to you?
I mean, me personally, I've never really considered myself a super like creative person, but I've also never like been the kind of person who's always coming up with like new ideas, which is why I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll go work for 20, 30 years in finance. I'll make some good money and I'll retire early. Like, who cares? Right. But like with this whole thing, it's like that's completely different. So it's kind of just, do I have what it takes to be a builder, or do I have to find something that maybe these AI won't actually disrupt? Right.
Okay, that's an interesting thought because in the last Satoshi Sundays, right, Dad and I, we were talking about what about those people that aren't builders? What would they do? And it so does it scare you a little bit when, you hear all this stuff about how the future is in the hands of those who can create?
I think it definitely does. You know, if you are all hearing all this talk about, these people that are like complete completely different in terms of like skill set and ideology and how they work and how that manifests in their day-to-day life, like, and that being completely different to how you are, but like they're the ones that are going to succeed, like obviously that is like oh, damn, how do I become like them? Do I need to become like them? Or is there a way for me to thrive the way I am as a person, right?
Yeah, this is an interesting, I think, line of questioning because the world has always been like this, right? Capitalism profits those who can create and who can essentially
Yes.
build more than
Yeah.
it profits anyone else. But I think the concept of a human employee is something that is going to be nearly extinct in the next, I want to say 15, 20 years, right? Maybe not even 15, maybe 10 years. So this is the key
I,
difference that I'm seeing.
can I interject for a minute? I don't think it will be extinct. Uh, what probably would not exist is the jobs as they exist today. Those won't exist. I strongly believe there will be new types of jobs, but we don't know what those jobs are,
Okay, but do you not
right?
think for, things like manual labor, when we have humanoids, those
Correct. So think about this, right? So back in the day, a large majority of the people were farmers, right? Then the tractors were introduced. Now you don't need 20 people to go to the same farm. One or two people could, you know, uh, harvest as much of food as is needed to feed the population, right? So
Mhm.
the percentage of people required to do farming to feed the population dropped significantly. But those people then moved on to other types of jobs, right? So whenever this kind of transition happens, one types of jobs go away, but a
Yeah,
new type will come up.
yeah,
What we don't know is what that new type is. So one thing that is surfacing right now is around this concept of AI engineer, right? Somebody needs to train the AI, somebody needs to build guardrails around the AI. But I don't think that's a long lasting thing as well, right? I don't know if you saw this. There was somebody from Anthropic who was working on their I don't remember what the team was exactly called, but think of it like AI ethics kind of stuff where they're
mhm,
building guardrails for AI.
yeah,
That guy basically left and said, I'm leaving this world. I'm going back to poetry.
mhm.
He left. He wrote a big post on X, and we should link it up for the audience. But he basically said, this is done, right? This is on its own path. I'm going to go back to poetry because AI cannot do poetry as well as humans do, right? So again, a long story short, I don't think human labor will completely go away.
Mhm.
Human employees or human jobs would still be required, but we don't know what those jobs are. So what skills would they need? We have
Yeah,
no
yeah.
clue,
Okay, fair, fair. This is fair.
right? Go ahead.
So, Vivon, coming back to my original question then, what are your thoughts on college, right? Because, Dad explained his conflicting thoughts and I have my own as well, but I'm curious to know about where your head is. Do you feel like you would get a good ROI on your degree, or are you thinking that, maybe this is you're only considering it because that's what's traditional?
I think it is a mix of both. Obviously, it is that kind of just sense of, oh, I have to go to university. Even though your teachers and principals might say you don't have to, they're still always talking about how, yeah, this many people got into this good universities, right? Because that's still kind of just the mainstream. So that is really influencing a big part of my decision. And right now, before, like, I would say probably a year ago, my question was, what do I want to study in university? And right now, it is genuinely like, do I actually want to go to university, or do I want to try to pursue something externally, right? Like, I'm really just trying to weigh my different options. Like, what would I study that wouldn't be disruptive? Because as we know, like, studying computer science for a degree, like, no offense, probably isn't the best idea anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I've kind of been thinking of things such as like math or physics, things that, like, the AI is not going to remove these things from the world. These things are going to stay forever. Things that I might be able to make a career out of if I'm good at it.
This is an interesting point that you touched on because Dad and I had a conversation about this in one of the earlier ones as well, where we pinpointed a few college majors that would be beneficial to go into words, right? Dad, I think you mentioned obviously there's medicine, but we also talked about engineering, whether that's chemical or electrical or mechanical. So if someone were to go to college, is it a safe bet to pick one of these majors and then go into a career that's in the engineering field?
Um, yes, but I think it's only it probably would be a short-lived career as well. Why do I say so? Today, the biggest bottleneck is not the software, right? We are at a point where software can write software,
Itself, yeah.
right? So that's what's happening. Anthropic, OpenAI, their most recent model releases were majority written by themselves.
Hmm.
It was not human developers; it was AI writing AI. But the bottleneck lies in power plants, data center buildouts, and humanoids. So all physical stuff. Software cannot create physical stuff. Not yet, right? So I think there is a path for the foreseeable future, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, where if somebody was an electrical engineer, they probably would be, they can find a job at a power plant because a lot of power plant build out will happen in the near future. Not just in the United States, it will be worldwide. Like China has been on this path for 15, 20 years. US was sleeping. They looks like they're finally waking up. So they will have to get behind it. And if you look at the rest of the world, like UAE is building data centers, India is building data centers, right? Thailand is building data centers. So all these data centers build out would require people to do the construction, but there will be inflection point where humanoids will reach a place where they will be able to create more humanoids. And then they don't need as many humans, right? So yes, it's recursive, right? And then like one part I really like about doing computer science. Sure, people think computer science is all about writing code. I think it's probably 20%. It's only 20%. The biggest thing it teaches you is problem solving. Because computer science problems, every problem is different. It's not like you are an electrical engineer. If this happens, you do this. This is like a playbook. You run through the playbook. And yes, there's some innovation, and some people will do it. But usually there is you do this, and if you cannot do all this, you are certified. Go, right? So and that problem solving skill is what makes you nimble, adaptable, especially when everything around you is changing fast. And guess what? In computer science, from a very long time, we've been saying 3 years is equal to infinity in computer science. Everybody else is kind of freaking out, right? Oh my God, where have we come in 3 years of AI? Guess what? In computer science, this was the case. Whatever worked 3 years ago is completely extinct.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to go deeper on this problem solving thing, computer science is special in that it teaches you to find what the problem is before it teaches you how to solve the problem, right? When a computer spits back out at you, if there's a problem in your program, if it says seg fault, what does that mean? You have to go find that, right? So this is something that I think is really interesting, and we can get into that later. But I don't think there are any majors or any degrees that are useless per se, because I think they all teach you different things. But I do think that the skills that you should be prioritizing in those degrees have started to change. When you were in college, you probably were prioritizing how to write the code. when I'm in college here, writing code, being able to write the code is the last of my worries, right? If I'm not going to AI, to ChatGPT or whatever to write the code, then I can always go to Stack Overflow and I can see where someone else has written the code. So this brings me to my point of like, or to my question of, adaptability and, where you see the skills of the new world kind of heading towards. And this is something I want to ask Vivon about before I ask Dad. So Vivon, as you're observing things, through me maybe or through Dad or other people in your life, are you seeing certain skills that you think are more important or certain skills that you think are dying?
I mean, I think one really big one, just, growing up in a generation that, COVID happened when I was still in elementary school, right? Communication skills are plummeted, right? They plummeted a lot. And it's it's actually kind of hard to find people who are good at face to face conversation, right? Like, there's a whole kind of thing that people on the internet will talk about. Oh, yeah, talking to people online is so much easier and so much more different. People present themselves so much more differently when they're on a phone screen or on a laptop screen than they are in person. And I think that's just a really big skill that, like, because of the whole pandemic has been inhibited, or like our growth has been has
Mhm.
been halted of that, right? And that's one big thing. And another one is also just working with artificial intelligence.
Okay, so I think what you're trying to say here is communication and I think AI savviness, being able to communicate with other people and being able to communicate with AI, if that's what I'm getting correctly.
Yeah, I would say so,
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Um, this is interesting because I definitely don't see it right like that, right? I think obviously our generation has a communication problem, but I wouldn't say that this is one of the skills that you need to prioritize. I think before you prioritize communication, you need to prioritize your creativity. You need to prioritize your discipline. You need to prioritize building, essentially. So, yeah, I mean, this is just interesting. Dad, do you
Okay,
kind of see things the same way Vaughn does?
I want to point something out. Like, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but to me, I think that a strong network is one of the most, if not the most important thing someone can have in their life, right? Like, knowing, for example, right? I remember on your last episode, you were talking about one of your friends is running a clothing business and needed a website, right? Like, if you don't have the ability, but you know somebody that does have the ability, like, you can still get the job done. So I think that's why, Tim, for me, personally, like, I do believe that that kind of communicating and that network is just such an important skill that not being able to hold a conversation with somebody is really, like, it gets in the way of that, right? And it gets in the way of something that I think is really important.
And you think networking is like a dying skill in our generation?
I think so. I would say so. There's kind of it's kind of like an imbalance. Like, I see some people, people I know in my school who are going, like, to business and finance conferences and meeting everybody, and other people who, like, don't even know what they're doing at all, right? They don't know anybody who wants to do something in their field. Don't know anybody who's, like, established in their field or something. And I think that's just it really stops your ability to actually grow and put yourself in that field, right? If I wanted to work in finance, if I wanted to become an investment banker, right? If I didn't know anybody on Wall Street or anybody in one of the major finance hubs, I would have a pretty tough time. I wouldn't be able to know where to go. I wouldn't have anyone to recommend me. And that's why, like, to me, I feel that communication is a super important skill. And I would say that is probably, like, the most important thing that we're missing. Like, if you think of in terms of, like, how the discrepancy of importance and, like, lack, I think that's
Mhm.
probably high up there.
Okay. Interesting. Dad?
Yeah. Um, I would agree with most of what both of you said, but if I were to put it in my words, I see a couple of skills completely dying out in your generation and to an extent in our generation too. right? And I would put them into three buckets. The first one is curiosity is completely gone, right? We are not curious about things. Why is it like this, right? Think of yourself, like when you go around, you probably don't remember when you were under, 5 years old, but when you see a young child, they do not stop asking questions, right? Why is this? Why is this? Why is this? Why is this way? Why is it not that way, right? Why does horse has a four legs, right? So as we age, the curiosity goes away completely. And we, start believing, oh, this is how it is, right? We stop questioning things. Then second thing, which is more prevalent in your generation than in our generation, and it's probably there's a lot of factors. COVID is one, introduction of social media and everything else is second one, which is critical thinking. We have talked a lot about that. I believe critical thinking is completely being wiped out. People don't want to think, why are you asking me to do this? Why is it this thing done this way? Right? What are your incentive? How are you going to benefit from this? Right? What's in it for you?
Mhm.
So that is the second skill, which I think is a very critical skill. That's it. It's called critical thinking. Right. The third thing is, I think this the fire in the belly to we need to do something. No matter how many times I fall, I'm gonna relentlessly go after it and actually succeed. That fire in the belly is kind of like, I'm not seeing that in that many young people anymore. Right? A lot of young people say, oh, this is how it is. And that is what is the rise of socialism. If you had the fire in the belly, you wouldn't be looking up to the government to provide for you. You'd be saying, oh, the system doesn't work for me. How do I get out of it? How do I break these chains and actually escape?
And do you think Bitcoin can be something that inspires this fire in the belly?
Um, yes and no.
Okay.
Just buying Bitcoin won't. Understanding Bitcoin will.
Okay. Actually, let's take a pause on this 1 second and let's get further into what does Bitcoin mean to you, Dad?
Um, I'll have to borrow some of Jeff Booth's work in this, right? What Jeff says is, for all other stuff, when it comes to measurement of distance, measurement of weight, measurement of temperature, we have standardized units,
Yeah.
right? A kilometer 20 years ago is still a kilometer.
Mhm.
It didn't shrink or expand. A kilogram 20 years ago is still a kilogram, right? Money was the only thing where we didn't had a standard unit of measurement, right? If you think of fiat currencies, dollars, euros, pounds, whatever, they are an elastic measuring unit, right? So one day it's longer, another day it's shorter, and that's the way you see value going up and down all the time, right? I see Bitcoin could be that measuring unit where one Satoshi is one Satoshi, right? Something that, like, with one Satoshi's buying power today would be same as one Satoshi's buying power 20 years from now. Like, we are not there yet, but that's the future that I buy into. And most likely that future is not for my generation, that is for your generation, right? So if you ask me what does Bitcoin means to me, Bitcoin is, in my mind, is that safety net that our generation can build for our future generations. most likely by the time the hyper Bitcoinization happens and Bitcoin becomes a medium of exchange and unit of account, 40, 50 years might have gone, right? We might not be around at that time, right? But you guys, your next generations would be around. And the finality of scarcity, kind of pushes me to think, if we don't do it, our next generations won't be able to do it. Right? That's a very important difference, because there is no way on this planet there can be more than 21 million. And if I remember correct, I think in next 2 weeks we'll hit the 20 million in circulation number, and the next 1 million is going to come over next 115, 120 years, give or take.
Yeah. Yeah. To buy 2140, right?
Um, I just wanted to say, Dad, for your analogy of comparing, the lack of a standard measurement of standard unit of measurement for money, it just puts into perspective how ridiculous the loss of value it is, right? It would be ridiculous to say that I'm 5'10" this year, but next year I'll be 6'2", and the year after I'll be 6'6", right? That just doesn't make sense. That you're like that's happening, right? And it really, like, I think that would be a really good way to kind of show somebody who doesn't like fully understand like the extent to how stupid the loss of value is, how stupid inflation
Mm-hmm.
is, right? Some people think that it's like, oh yeah, it's just part of the government, part of the system. What can we do about it, right? But it shouldn't be that way. Like, money
Yeah,
should
and
have a unit of measurement too.
exactly, exactly.
Ivan, do you have conversations about money with your friends?
Nothing like this. No.
Okay, so you don't talk about inflation.
I've I have before, but it's not a regular conversation. And
Okay.
none of my friends are really orange pilled. None of them really even know like what orange pilling is. They don't know any of the
Yeah.
actual like content. And I, you know, we're still in high school. I haven't really made the effort to try and orange pill them
Okay.
as you have
Yeah.
with some of your
Yeah.
friends.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, we are in very different stages of life. I was only asking because I was wondering if, you knew what the kind of perception of Bitcoin and the perception of inflation was for someone who is 17. Because I think back to when I was 17, right? And I could not explain to you what inflation was. Obviously, I knew it was printing more money, but I couldn't tell you why we needed to print more money or why we couldn't just stop printing money. Um, Anything like that. And I could not tell you what Bitcoin was beyond like the Bitcoin protocol paper that I wrote.
I think my friends mostly have the fundamental understanding of Keynesian economics and how that plays
Mhm.
into our capitalist society, but they don't really know anything about Bitcoin. Like I had this one friend who is like kind of into crypto, but he's completely thinks that Bitcoin is stupid because of like just it's like the most mainstream thing, right? So to like all the crypto bros, Bitcoin is terrible. And then to
Yeah.
all of the normal people who view like they still think Bitcoin is a scam, right? Like you'll hear on like some news network like CNBC, yeah, Bitcoin is it's going down tomorrow. Like bet against it, right?
Yeah.
That's still the widespread perception of Bitcoin, right? It's no matter who you ask, if it's the person is not from the orange pilled community, if it's not from the Bitcoin community, they're going to be
Mhm.
against Bitcoin, right? That's just
Yeah.
what the media has taught them to think.
Yeah, absolutely. Are your friends into investing at all?
I think most of them are, I do have a couple friends that are actually into like full on day trading, but
Oh, wow, okay.
a lot of my
So
friends like they do some like investing on the side, or some people do DECA and they
yeah,
have like portfolios for that and whatnot.
yeah. It's interesting to me that 17-year-olds in high school are thinking about day trading before they're thinking about, Bitcoin. I mean, I guess I understand the sentiment to make money quickly and how day trading can kind of play into that. And I do blame the rise in like Instagram finance influencers who are continuously pushing, day trading and options trading and forex, and it's a lot going on. So the reason I asked you this is because I want to start asking if this idea of Bitcoin as a savings account makes sense to you. Do you understand what Dad and I are saying when we paint Bitcoin as a savings account?
Yes, I do because fact that Bitcoin, there's a fixed amount of it that can ever exist, right? That inherently means like it's not going to depreciate in value. I've seen a lot of the things where it's like a lot of the memes or pictures or whatnot graphs comparing like money, Bitcoin, and the price of a house, right? Like a
Mhm.
price of a house went from like $300,000 to $2 million, but the price of
Mhm.
a house in Bitcoin has gone from like whatever thousand Bitcoin to now like less than 20, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of the way I see it is that Bitcoin isn't it is gaining some value, but eventually it's going to stop gaining value. The US dollar is going to start losing value. And it's like
Mhm.
instead of like the US dollar staying flat and the Bitcoin going up, it's kind of the other way around where it's going down. And that's kind
Yeah.
of how I see it.
It's an interesting point.
I don't know if you guys saw it, but I know that all these doomers who keep saying is going to zero. I will share my screen and show you two things. Right
Is
here.
it the buy order that's placed?
Give me a second. So I believe you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Uh, yes, there it is.
Right. So Abu Dhabi's wealth fund, they have, like, this is 2 days ago, their Bitcoin ETF, which is IBET essentially, they're holding topped $1 billion,
Wow.
right? This is Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund. They are putting $1 billion, and then people think it's going to zero, right?
Well, that is
Dubai is doing the same thing. I'll show you another important one. So Jeff Park is one of the most respected analyst, works for ProCap, works with Anthony Pompliano, CIO for ProCap. He basically showed a new entrant entered into IBET. So there is this one company. It's a Hong Kong based fund. So it's like, this is the name of the company. They recently started this fund. In their fund, they have only one holding, that is 436 million of Bitcoin, or essentially IBET. One holding. They don't have anything else.
Yeah.
And since it's a Hong Kong based fund, most likely it's money from China, because Chinese people cannot buy Bitcoin directly, right? So anybody who's worried about doom and gloom, Bitcoin is going to zero, good luck with that, right? I think those days are over. We have all kind of positive support. Sure, the price action is not agreeing with everything else. Fine, right? Bitcoin is, and that's the reason I said Bitcoin for me is a multi-decade asset.
Mhm.
Like, it's like I'm not expecting it to go to 1 million next year. No.
Yeah.
And as you know, initial holders have said, if Bitcoin isn't going to zero, it's going to 1 million. The question is, when does it happen, right? I think it's going to happen sometime in early 2030s, like 32, 33 time frame. So like 7, 8 years from
Wow,
now,
okay, yeah.
right? Um, there are people who are saying next year. There's have people saying 2030.
Mhm.
I don't care if it happens in 2035 or 2040. Doesn't really matter. Right? The key thing to note is, if it's not going to zero, it's going to 1 million, and then it's going to 5 million, it's going to 10 million. Or as Sarah likes to say, it's going up forever, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say is I don't think Gen Z specifically is in the headspace where we think Bitcoin is gonna go to zero. I think the apprehension with Bitcoin comes with the fact that at the end of the day, it is still labeled a cryptocurrency. And I think Gen Z is very divided here. Obviously, I have friends who are like crypto bros to the max. I'm talking XRP, I'm talking Solana, ETH,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dogecoin back in the day. you guys know about Dogecoin from back in the day, right? But I also have friends on the flip side who are very like they anti-crypto, anything that's, not the traditional S&P. And in the S&P, they'll stick to index funds, or maybe they'll stick to like what? The Mag 7.
Yeah.
And
Like if,
so,
so even if you buy index fund, like let's say you buy SPY, which is an ETF that tracks S&P 500,
yeah.
35% of S&P 500 is Mag 7,
Yeah.
right? So, but I would say one thing, it's not just Gen Z. In general, a lot of people hate Bitcoin for two reasons. One, they have not done any work. They don't understand what this is, right? For to them, it's still internet funny money, or there are doomers like Peter Schiff who probably make more money by just ranting against Bitcoin versus through compared to his own gold business. But that aside, um, so there's one camp who have like, we are not willing to study anything. People who have a little bit of money, they're real estate investors, index fund investors. They don't want to spend any more time. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, which where most of Gen Z falls and some of millennials and some of Gen Xers fall as well, is when they look at Bitcoin, even at today's prices, whatever it's like $68,000, not many people in the world can actually shell out $68,000 today to buy one. That's the first thing. The related part of this is, even if they did, and Bitcoin doubled from here, tripled from here, 3K, 200K is not a life-changing amount. You can't take that money and disappear in the wind, right? So what most of people are looking for is their lottery ticket, where they put $1 and get $1 million back, right? That is so, and that is the reason, the rise of gambling culture, that the video that you did earlier this week. The rise of gambling culture is primarily because of this fact that people feel they are being left out, and they don't. I think, and that kind of ties into my point I was making. I don't see that fire in the belly. Like, I will do whatever it takes to pull myself out, and then they get dragged into gambling.
Yeah. Yeah. Instant gratification, right? Getting rich
Correct.
by any means
Correct.
possible.
And then and that basically leads to the rise of these Polymarkets and Kalshis of the world,
Yeah.
where like these guys came out of nowhere and suddenly like you can bet on anything you want.
Yeah. You guys watched the Super Bowl. I'm sure you noticed all of the ads that were just
Like,
smart betting.
in a way, like in a way, I like the kind of data that I get from Polymarket and Kalshi, because
Okay.
major-
Interesting.
I'll tell you why, right? So you remember a couple of episodes ago we talked about Clarity Act.
Yes.
The odds of Clarity Act passing in 2026, I think it was yesterday or the night before, jumped from 50% to 90%.
Wow.
Right? 90% means there is certainty it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I have, like, whenever it comes to political kind of stuff, I have rarely seen any prediction going wrong there. Like, whatever they're projected, the odds are, that is the thing that usually gets
Yeah.
confirmed.
Think about where they're getting that data, right? So,
Right? You have the insider edge.
yeah. Yeah.
Right?
On this note, Vivan, do you have friends that sports bet?
Yes, but there are like, obviously we're pretty young, so the ones that do are like in very, very small amounts, like they under $50,
That's
right?
fair, but still, it's
But
building the habit, right?
yeah,
$1 can turn into $100 so quickly. Like placing a $1 bet can turn into placing a $100 bet so quickly. And by the time you're there, you'll never know when you're in 1,000, 10,000,
like I
100,000.
I do have a friend who was like, for a good month or so, was consistently on it. Like us as a group, we held an intervention. It's like, you know what? We're
Yeah.
deleting the app off your phone. We're deleting Kalshi, right? But I think the biggest thing is that, like, obviously with the Super Bowl ads, especially, like, it's so mainstream. If we think of like all these big big faces in pop culture, right? Like Drake is always posting his $1 million bets on stake, right? Like even in terms of like non-English, like Karan Aujla, very popular Punjabi singer, he's sponsored by Stake. He's always talking about like, oh yeah, I just put like $100,000 on India to beat Pakistan in a cricket match, right? And it's everywhere. And it doesn't even go like start with this sports betting that happened like recently, right? You think about Bruno Mars, like 10 years ago, what was he known for? Like losing all of his money gambling in a casino and only coming back to make music when he needs more, right? Gambling
Yeah.
is like, it's, I would say, besides like caffeine and alcohol, gambling is the most normalized addiction we have. Like caffeine, alcohol, social media, and then gambling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
People
know
it's
what
see
the
it
big,
like a
you know what
pastime.
the biggest addiction in the world is?
is it
What?
your phone?
Social media?
Salary.
Salary or money?
Salary.
Okay, why?
A lot of the people who become an employee don't want to become a builder, even though they know if they become builder, they have a potential to make multifold more. But the risk is giving up this fixed, consistent stream of income for an unknown.
I was having a similar conversation with my friends last night. I think one of them brought up the question, like, would you rather $10 million right now or a 1 in 3 chance that you get $50 million? Right? Like, obviously, like mathematically speaking, your expected value for the second choice is to choose it because you have like $16.7 million, right? But every single one of my friends said $10 million. And so did I. I wouldn't blame them, right? It's a 1 in 3 chance. What would you do? Like, if you think about that kind of money, like, okay, $10 million, it's not as much as $50 million, but it's enough, right? Same thing with the
That's a
salary,
life-changing amount.
right? Right? It's like, why would you give that up? It's like for people who are making a salary, like, yeah, okay, I could start a business and make 5 times more, but if I'm living comfortably off of what I have right now, what's the point, right?
Yeah. That and leaving your salary to start whatever it is you're building, that takes you from a place where you have, your fixed income down to a place where you're back at zero to potentially get to a place where you're up here, right? So looking at the psychology behind that, I wouldn't categorize it as an addiction because it makes sense, right? Human beings, we value security and we value certainty.
Let me. You said it right. Humans value certainty.
Yeah,
We will want predictability, but guess what? No job is permanent,
that is true.
right? I'll give you another example, right? Um, there is this idea of financial independence and retiring early, right? This FIRE movement in the world. This started probably 15 years ago. And then especially in the tech industry, a lot of people were chasing it. But there is also a one more year syndrome that is associated with it, which is even after you have achieved your goals, right? 1 year of extra saving is not going to change your life in any meaningful way. People still keep going because it is very hard to say, no, thank you. I don't need my salary anymore.
Greed drives humans, right? This is all powered by
Is it greed or is it actually an addiction?
maybe it's the addiction
Or
to greed.
I have another proposal. What if it's like ignorance or just lack of um being informed, right? I remember one of the first books you made me read was the
Compounding effect.
not the compound effect, the million one. I forgot what the title was. It was the
Quit
woman
like a
and her
millionaire.
husband quit
Quit
like a
Quit
like a
like a
millionaire.
millionaire. Yes.
Right?
Great book.
My key takeaway from that book was you have to set a goal for yourself, and once you accomplish that goal, be like, you know what, this is enough for me, I don't want to go any further, right? Like they mathematically calculated using fire and everything that, like, okay, $1 million portfolio, that's today, we can retire, don't look back, right? And I think that's something that doesn't exist for like more than 90% of our population. They don't have this kind of financial education, right? Like we're not taught any of this in school. We're taught, okay, you go to college, you work. You retire when you're what, 65, 67, retirement age?
Yep. I think it's 67 is the full
Yeah.
retirement age in the US.
Isn't it
So
72 for
th-
like extra benefits?
here is another thing
Crazy.
to this, to just build onto the thought that you shared, Vivan, is even to those people like who can't fathom accumulating $1 million or whatever. If somebody gives them $1 million and say quit tomorrow, they
They
won't.
wouldn't be able to do it.
Right? Only people that would do are the people who actually hate their jobs. Right? If somebody is working in hospitality industry and if they are not really like that's not their passion, they would quit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? But if somebody has a cushy job, like somebody's an accountant and they make six figure, they might not have accumulated $1 million, but if you say like, hey, here is $1 million after tax, go do whatever the hell you want to do, they won't quit. Rather, what they will do is they'll take this $1 million and build more liabilities for them. They'll buy a bigger house, they'll buy a fancy car and go under debt, and most likely will eventually end up broke.
Yeah. I mean, like almost all lottery winners, almost all former athletes, they go bankrupt because they are accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and when they can't sustain it, right?
I think for most of the sports people, the biggest reason is because they make money very fast in a very young age. It's not their money. It's usually the entire community money, like their parents, their brothers, their third cousin, because, oh,
Hmm.
I have this, I'm going to do everything for everybody. And before they
Yeah.
realize,
They're
they
out of
end
it.
up broke because their careers are also very short lived. They don't have a 30-year career.
I mean, one thing I've noticed, which I don't know if there's any like actual thing behind it, but I feel like it's a lot more prevalent in American sports, like in terms of the NFL, NBA, those leagues, than European sports, like the Premier League and other like I don't know if it's like a cultural thing or if it's just like a pure coincidence, right? But you don't hear
I think
as
it's
many.
because NFL is a very dangerous sport as
I
opposed.
mean,
I'm not
careers are a
saying
lot
that,
shorter, right?
soccer isn't dangerous as well, but you can't have someone in their 40s running down the field getting like pounded by.
I mean, Tom Brady was doing it.
That's Tom Brady's a legend. Tom Brady's out of the
Yeah.
question.
But I don't
Yeah.
know. I feel like I'm not really sure if that's like a maybe a cultural thing. You know, American culture is obviously very consumerist inherently, or if it's just like a lack of
I think that
media
definitely
information.
plays a
But
factor. Like consumerism is, shoved down your throat in America. Like uh, the whole idea of these large stores, large e-commerce stores where you can buy almost everything like Amazon. Like if
Yeah.
you go to any other country's Amazon website, their selection is significantly smaller.
Yeah.
Significantly smaller, right? You don't get stuff 4 hours later. You usually get it in 2 days, 5 days, right? If you're not gonna get right now, the chances of you ordering something dramatically reduces.
And Amazon knows this.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Amazon
And
knows.
in one of the early interviews, Jeff Bezos has said that so Jeff Bezos' idea, one thing I really like about Jeff Bezos is he built the business not around what customers will want next. He built the business around what will not change in customers' demand. So he basically said, I cannot see a world where customers would say, I don't want lower prices and I don't want fast shipping. Those are the two grounding principles where he built the business. Like customers will always want lower prices and the customers will always want faster shipping.
Yeah, yeah. We've drifted quite a bit from the main topics of this episode. So I think just to bring everything all back, I don't have any, follow-up questions, but Vivan, do you have any questions for me? For Dad?
I mean, okay, obviously over the past few months, you've been working on content creation and whatnot. How do
Yeah.
you see content creation as like a job, just like in general, not for you specifically, but just like in general? Like, how will AI take over? Like, I know, like, especially in the Bitcoin world,
Yeah.
there are
Okay.
so much AI content, like AI written, AI voiceover, AI edited, AI uploaded, right? And like, how do you see a human's role in that?
So I'm going to preface this by saying I don't believe in AI made content at all. I'm talking uploading AI generated videos of yourself instead of filming it yourself and using AI voiceovers instead of doing it yourself. And that's because I think content requires a human connection to it. As we head into a world that is going to be so dominated by AI and we cannot tell what is real, what is fake, I think we are going to start craving people a lot more in our personal lives, but then we're also going to look to the internet because we live on the internet, right? Like Vivan, you know this. Our generation lives on the internet. And we live in the world of TikTok and podcasts as opposed to TV and Netflix, right? I can't remember the last time I watched Netflix because my free time is spent on YouTube, consuming other people's content, other people's thoughts, as opposed to some made up story. Even Netflix has shifted to adopting podcasts and putting those on their platform as well, right? So what I'm trying to say is we crave human connection in content so much, which is why I think while content creation is definitely going to change, building a rapport with your audience and establishing your image, your brand, and who you are as a person, and then putting that out on the internet for people to see actual people. This is, I think, where the strength is going to lie in content. And I think Dad might have a bit of a differing perspective on this, but that's what I think.
I mean, hence why
Um,
I said communication was one of the most important skills that people need to improve, right?
Communication versus connection.
I
That's
I feel like they do go kind of hand to hand, but yeah, Dad, you can go on.
yeah. Um, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I would say a little bit more, but from a different angle. I think what is happening right now, or has been happening in ever since the rise of social media, what we consume is controlled by the algorithm, right? It's not about your tastes anymore and whatnot. And algorithms feed off of engagement.
yeah.
Engagement feeds off of, negativity, FOMO, rage, that kind of stuff, right? So algorithms keep driving you into some sort of echo chambers. And with the rise of AI, what is happening is these echo chambers are becoming louder and louder. Right. So I was reading an article by Jeff Booth, because he recently started posting back on X, and everybody was like, he was a Noster. What happened? Why did he come back? So I read on his website, his article. So what he's essentially done is he created a bot for X. He trained this bot with all of his content, with all of his podcast, and said, "This is who I am." And then he basically says, people like to argue on social media because almost likely on the other side, they're either people, they might be people, they might be bots. So now these people are just arguing with his bot, right? Bot is gently, refuting their claims or doing
Yeah.
whatever, while he is busy building stuff on Nostr with real people.
Mhm.
So where I'm going with this is there will be place for authentic, genuine human content, right? But that those might not be in the same places where it happens today, right? I wouldn't be surprised if X primarily becomes AI dominated,
It's already
right?
becoming primarily AI
Right?
dominated.
Yep. And still there are a few voices which are human, but I over time, that probably will keep getting in that rabbit hole. Instagram, TikTok, probably YouTube. I believe there is already a rise of AI content, but there is still a lot of genuine content there.
Yeah.
My worry is, would this like today, if you watch watch a piece of content, you can very quickly tell this is AI or not,
Yes.
right? But I think that line is fading away. So that, it might sound like I'm painting a doom and gloom kind of picture, but I'm not. I think where the real good, authentic creators will shine is being innovative, but how do they constantly keep differentiating themselves from AI, right? And I think the most important piece in my mind there is humans can do storytelling better than AI,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
humans have done storytelling for thousands of years. Humans remember stories, right? If you look back in your past, there might be bits and pieces you remember from very early years. Not everything, but usually that is some incident, some story that happened. That's the reason you remember it, right? You don't remember every day, but you remember stories. So if you can become better at storytelling, that probably will be your edge.
I mean, like we're kind of relating this back to, Bitcoin. I think there's a reason why whenever someone wants to introduce another person to Bitcoin, one of the first things they go to is what's the problem, right? Because it is a story. And like out of out of all of the Bitcoin like content obviously I've consumed a lot
Yeah.
less than you two have, but out of all the things I have, like there's that and then the Jack Mahler's things. Like those are the two things that are like stuck in my mind whenever I think about Bitcoin, right? So I think that's pretty nice. And
People
also
connect with people,
one thing I
because
really like about content and specifically like in like the Bitcoin community, I've seen you went to the Bitcoin Mina in Dubai a few months ago, right? And you're planning on going to more events, right? Like this kind of close-knit community allows for like human connection, as you were saying, is so important in the content realm. And I think that is probably like that would probably be the best way to differentiate yourself from like AI content.
I agree, but I will also go as far to say there is a lot of AI generated just slop content in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin space as well. In fact, I think there are a lot of Bitcoin creators, but there is also on the flip side a decent amount of AI content. So I agree with Dad's point. I agree with what you're saying. I just think that people connect with people, and this is why I think a little optimistic with the future of content when it comes to AI, because AI can't communicate emotion. It can try to replicate human voices, but humans can make you feel things. AI cannot.
I think that's the point where I have a slightly different opinion. I think I feel AI is getting better.
It's getting
Uh,
better. That's
and
for
and
sure.
I think it comes out the same thing. Remember a couple of episodes ago we talked about AI doesn't have to be better than the best person on your team.
It
So
has to be
AI
better than
doesn't
the
have to be
average.
better than the best creator. AI
Yeah.
doesn't have to beat Mr. Beast,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mr. Beast.
AI, yeah, exactly. Like that guy has 1 billion followers.
Yeah, it's just crazy that you know who Mr. Beast is.
He's
I think
everywhere.
it
He's
would be
building a
more crazy if
bank.
you didn't know him.
He's
Yeah, that's
building a
fair.
bank now,
He is, yeah.
right? So sure, I have not consumed his content, but I know who he is. So AI doesn't have to beat him. All AI has to does is it has to be better than 50, 60, 70% of the creators, which is not too far.
Yeah,
Like
I
a lot
agree.
of the content today you see, you know, content is good. The delivery is sloppy,
Yeah,
right? I think AI can overcome that very quickly. So this is
100.
where I think where the real good creators will have to be more innovative. They have to do things which is harder for AI to reproduce.
Yeah. This is something actually that do you remember the network state? It was kind of like a showcase of all of or the network school, sorry, the network school was a showcase of all of the different projects that people are working on. So they had the guy who does beer biceps, Ranveer something.
The Ranveer, yeah, Ranveer.
Yeah. Yeah. So he came on and, he was speaking with Balaji about just the future of content in the AI world and everything. And he had a very doom and gloom outlook on things, which was kind of insane for me to hear because he's Ranveer. He's Beer Biceps. He is he is the biggest, if not no, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, I think, podcast
He's
in
one
India
of the
right.
biggest, yes.
Yeah. So it was insane. He was talking a lot about how he thinks that AI is going to come in and completely replace it. So he does not see his own content as sustainable in the long term. And it's an interesting time, I think, to be alive, number one, but second, to be trying to create a personal brand for yourself and putting it out on the internet. Yeah, interesting question you had there, Vivon. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode then. It was definitely all over the place, but I enjoyed it. I like this dynamic of, having Vivon on here as well. So, to the listeners, let me know what you thought of this episode. If you, enjoyed it, if you want to see more of Vivon, or, if you didn't like it as much, maybe don't let us know in the comments on that. But let us know what else you want, discussed in the next Satoshi Sundays. I've seen a lot of comments from you guys talking about AI and more on the building side. So I'm going to try to keep that a recurring theme throughout the segment. But yeah, with that being said, I'm your host, Nikki. This is my dad. That is my brother. And we had a great time making this for you today. And stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay orange pilled. I will see you on Tuesday.